So this is my tree before I fluffed it out, and as you can see, it doesn't look like much. Now I'll spare you the whole process of watching me fluff out a Christmas tree, but what I would say is it's worth spending the time to really fluff out your tree. Really take the time, make a good job of it, because it can really affect the end result. The other thing to note is, if you're working with, this is the first time I've worked with a frosted tree. If you're working with a frosted tree, please keep it away from any shag pile rugs, as I have learned that lesson the hard way and had to bin a perfectly good rug because I just could not get the white fluff out. And likewise, if you've got a woolen jumper or something on, you maybe want to just keep some old clothing for this occasion. Now, as I mentioned, budget tree, quality isn't great, and if you look in here, you can see the middle stem a mile away. It's bare, it looks a bit ugly. Sorry tree, but it's true. But the way we're going to decorate this, I'm going to be able to hide that stem completely. But the first bit we need to move on to, another dull, boring bit, the bit that I don't enjoy, is putting on the lights. Now, here are my lights, and yes, you may think this is possibly a bit overkill for a small 6-foot pencil tree like this, and you might well be right. However, I do love a lot of lights on my tree. What I would recommend that you do before you put your lights on is just switch them on, check that all the bulbs are working. The last thing you want to have to do is take them all off again because there's a fault and you need to find out where it is. So that would be my top tip. Put the lights on, check them out first before you go ahead and put them on. Yes, this probably is overkill for this size of tree, and it looked very, very messy when I first put the lights on, but again, we can hide all that. I think there's probably 1,000 lights here, if not more. If you have a pencil tree, I'd maybe go for less than that, because it is quite hard, it's quite difficult to hide them, but it definitely can be done. But I'll show you the whole process, and you can see whether you want to go for a lot of lights like this or whether you want to scale it down a little bit. So what I decided to do this year, usually what I do is I work with these two individual balls of lights, and I have to sort of manage these simultaneously as I wrap them both around the tree, which is, to be honest, an absolute nightmare. So this year, it's worse trying to get them off, but it's quite difficult trying to put them on as well. So this year what I've decided to do is I've decided just to wrap, now it is a bit time consuming, but I think it'll be worth it in the long run. I've decided to wrap one set of lights around the other to basically just make one long string of lights. Now I'm hoping that they space out enough that it gives a long string of lights like this, and it's not going to sort of just double up on lights. So that, I'm hoping it doesn't end up like that. I'm hoping it's going to space out. You see that one there's not ideal because these are too close together, but some of the other ones up at the top here have spaced out quite nicely. So I'm going to continue on doing this, and we'll see how that goes this year. So here we go. A couple of hours later, I finally wrapped the lights up. So I've got one string of lights to work with rather than two. And you can see they've came out quite well. Kind of like cluster lights, maybe not quite as close together as cluster lights. But in the interest of keeping this a budget tree, then I wanted to use the lights that I already had. I just wanted to simplify it for myself. So, moment of truth. Yep, that works. So now I can go ahead and pop them on the tree. So here we have it with the lights on, and I'll just zoom in and I'll show you that, I don't know if you can see that, but it looks very, very messy. Lots of wires, really obvious, and it's especially at the top because it's so thin at the top, and because the tree's so sparse. So you can see that it looks pretty awful at the moment, but that will be fixed as we start to put on the decorations. But let's just take a little step back and see how lovely it looks with all those lights on. So big investment in time to wrap up those lights, to wind them all on. I haven't even sorted them out yet. I wrap them all around and then I'll go in as I'm putting the decorations in, and I'll sort of push them into the tree a bit more. So yeah, while it's not so much investment money wise, to have a nice tree, it really is a time investment, and I think that's something just to be mindful of. So let's get on to the next stage, and that will be putting on the first decorations. So here we have my box of tricks, and I've got an assortment of baubles, ribbon, nice sort of glittery objects. I like to go for some oversized baubles because that really does fill in a lot of the gaps, and that's after the lights, this is the first thing that I'll put on, and then we can start to fill in with some of the nicer things. A good tip when you're trying to design a tree on a budget is to buy some cheaper ornaments, to make the bulk of them cheaper, and just because they're cheap doesn't mean to say that they don't have to look nice. So the bulk of them are going to be the cheaper ones, and then if you can afford it, have a few special pieces, ones that are a wee bit more pricey, and they'll sit towards the front of your tree. And those are the ones that you want yourself to see, you want everyone else to see. So it is worth investing in some special pieces, but you don't need tons of them. So let me start taking you through building up the tree. Starting with some of the largest baubles that you have, if you can get your hands on some of these big ones. These are really good value for money because they do take up a lot of space, which saves you having to buy some of the more expensive things. So as I go, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to, the bits where I haven't tidied up the lights, I'm just going to fix them as I go along. So just pushing them back into the tree. I don't want them all towards the back of the tree, but I do want to hide the wires. So let's start down, especially where there's a lot of wires. So like in here, I don't know if you can see that there, but there's a big clump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a branch here. I'm going to, and these are just the strings that the baubles came with. I'm going to push that right towards the back of the branch, and then I'm going to twist it on. And the reason for that is I don't like to see baubles hanging like that on the end of a tree. I like to see the baubles pushed way inside. I think it just adds a more special look for the tree. One thing that I had contemplated doing, but I just forgot to buy it, was I was going to get some thin garden wire, and instead of using the thin strings, I was going to get the garden wire and use that to twist on. So I think that would probably be a better idea. I think it would work better, but for this, just to show you, I'm just going to use the string and we'll just twist it in. So again, find a branch that I want to go right into the back of, and you can see that bauble sitting still quite low down on the branch. So what I'm going to do, and again it's time consuming but it's worth it, I'm just going to twist, and it'll twist itself round that string, and it'll bury its way right in towards the back or the stem of the tree, the main stem of the tree. And you'll know when you've gone too far enough because you won't really be able to twist it any further. But it does take a bit of time. So I think that's looking pretty good. I could probably keep twisting, but I don't want to break the string either. So if I give it a gentle tug, it's not going anywhere, it's not coming out. And just look how it's nestled right inside that tree, and it just makes it look better than if it's hanging on the end of the branch. So I'm going to continue that with all of my larger baubles, and then I'll go on to the more medium-sized ones, and I'll just repeat the process. So that's the larger baubles on, and the more medium-sized ones. You can't really go wrong with this bit. You can't really go wrong with decorating the tree at all. But every now and again, just take a step back. That's one of my tips. Just take a step back, have a look at it from a distance, and just see if you need to move anything. So I've moved a few things. Maybe I had I had two chrome baubles that were too close together, and I swapped them round for different colours. And really just, you'll be able to sort of pick out any wee details that you want to swap around. So now that I've got the bulk of it in, you can see that that's been covered quite nicely now. Still got a lot of gaps to fill in, still got a lot of lights to cover up, or the wires for the lights to cover up. And I'm going to get now onto the smaller baubles, and I'll start filling in the holes before we come back on to putting some fancier stuff in. I've left some of this size because when I put the tree into its final place, this one's going to be in a corner, so I just want to keep a few filler baubles for the sides so that I can fill in any gaps that you can see from either side. But the back, I've really tried to cover half of this tree. The back doesn't have anything on it at all, but I do know that when it goes into the corner there will be the odd gap that I want to plug with these. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill some of those gaps in again, hiding some of those wires with the smaller baubles before we can get on to some of the fancier ornaments and the ribbon. So I decided to put half of the smaller baubles on, because what I don't want to do is put all the baubles on and then realise that I don't have enough space for these, or I will have space for them, but I don't want to have to be moving everything around. So I'm going to stop there with the baubles, and then I'm going to put on these lovely stars. I've got two colours. I've got the silver and the blue, and what I like to do is I like to have them going in like a zigzag pattern up the tree and have them alternating colours. So I would maybe have the silver and then the blue and then again silver, blue, and have them working that way up the tree. So I'll go ahead, I'll pop these on and come back when I've finished that part and we can get on to the next bit. Now for the stars, I tend not to have to twist them round the same as I do with the baubles, especially the higher up the tree you go, because they're just the perfect shape to sit nicely on the branches. Still push the string way back into the tree so that you can disguise it, and then because of the star shape it should just nestle in there nicely, and then you should be able to position it. Now I'm going to start working on the Christmas tree top. Now I'm not a star or an angel type person on the top of the tree. It's just, I grew up with that. We always had the star on the top of the tree, but as I started to decorate my Christmas trees I started to veer away from that, because there's so much more things of interest that you can do at the top of a tree. It's called a Christmas tree topper, and it's not one single thing, it's a variety of different things. It's usually in the form of sprays, different ornaments, maybe some ribbon. You can really get creative with a topper, and I think that's what I love most about it. The other thing from the benefit of having a pencil tree is that again you can just give that illusion of width if you use a Christmas tree topper. So I'll show you what we're going to use for that. So I've got some very inexpensive sprays, and we'll just be positioning them coming out at different angles, and we'll use a selection of ornaments. I'm going to use these cute little hearts, and they'll make up the topper, and I may put in some more baubles, and we'll just get a bit creative and we'll see what happens. So as you can see, we're taking the spray at an angle and pushing it down into the centre of the tree. If it's long, you can bend it like I have, and then that way it'll avoid it coming right out the other side, especially if you've got a narrow tree. So that's the sprays in. I've also used it to hide some of these wires, because the wires were really exposed at the top, so I've just used the topper as well to disguise those, to push them back a bit, and I think that's looking pretty good. And I'll move on to the baubles. That's the finished topper. I might decide to put some tiny baubles in, but I think it actually looks pretty good as it is. So I may leave it at that, but we'll see. So the final thing that I'm going to put on the tree is some ribbon. Now this is probably my favourite thing to put on the tree, and I put it on last because it helps me to fill some gaps, but it also, this is the thing that I think really makes a tree look special. It makes a tree look really quite expensive, and it's just simple, very inexpensive ribbon, and I'll show you how I put it on. Try to get, if you're going to put ribbon on, try to get wired ribbon, so ribbon that's got the wire up the sides, because it just makes it easier to mould. So I'll take a large strip. Doesn't matter if it's in one strip or not. This ribbon here is in various strips. I've got 3 different designs, and I'm just going to start. What you'll find is that you'll probably have to move things around as you start to put your ribbon on. I'm just going to put it on first, and then I'll start to make any changes. So hide your ends, you want to tuck your ends in. So I'm just going to start up here, just underneath this bauble, and I'm going to tuck that end in. And then I'm just going to tuck it in and give it a little squeeze behind this bauble. And I'm going to bring you round a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this branch and I'm going to twist it round just to hold the ribbon in place, and that's not going anywhere. And I'm just going to repeat that down the length of the tree. Just pinch, tuck it in, and then wrap a branch around, and you can already see that it's starting to look really, really effective. So I'm going to continue on doing the different ribbons, and I'll come back when that's done. So we are about done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the last of the baubles and I'm going to fill in all the gaps. There are some spaces that I can still see a few of the wires showing through. I might move some baubles, some of the coloured ones that are hidden behind the ribbon, and I'm just going to play about and make some finishing touches. The other good thing about the ribbon is, if you can see where there's maybe some space on the sides, as I said, it's going to be going into a corner, but there might just be bits where it looks a bit bare, and I think the ribbon does a really good job of disguising that and filling in that space. So let me finish it off, we'll get it into position, and then I'll show you what it looks like as a completed tree. So here she is in her Christmas home. This is where she'll stay for the next month, and I think you'll agree, definitely an ugly duckling to swan